bits of grime. This actually probably doesn't even need gluing in the way it's looking. Let's just get it quickly redone up. How can you see? How are you doing? You're doing right. Yeah, we'll get it quickly done up. We haven't even got onto the what's it call it yet? Tremolo. Fingers crossed this is a straightforward drop in. Okie dokie. Looking good. Up. Don't you dare come out of there. Right, give this a pull. Just check this as a, make sure the nut's perfectly spot on, and then we'll be ready to go with the important next bit. I like it. Perfect. Oh, just a bit more in there actually. That's perfect now. You stay put. Lovely. Right, we're done. Quick close-up of this. That's that bit done. Now we can sort of speed up, move along. Beautiful. And then, I don't know if you can see on the side there. There we go. That little boost on the bottom to make it work. All right, so how are we doing? We've got probably hours of footage already. Now I'm going to do the next important bit, get these strings off, do the what we're going to do, we're going to do the crowning the frets, we're going to change the string trees, we're going to replace the tremolo, hopefully with no problems at all. Thank you, Sacrificial Strings, you've been very kind. I probably have to take a break and recharge a load of batteries in a minute. So here we go. Oh yeah, we're going to do a little bit of shaping of that scratch plate as well, because I think it's holding up the tremolo as it currently stands. The scratch plate is buckled a little bit, so it looks like it's not quite on where it should be, but we'll try and address that in a minute if it's possible. But if it's buckled over time, then we may not be able to do anything about it. Right. When I was driving up here yesterday, I came across a fox in the lane. Right, let's get this this one out. We've still got the fret crowning to do, but I'm going to do that afterwards. Let's get off the tremolo and try a new one. Now, we don't really need to change the claw or anything like that, because there's nothing about that that requires to be any special thing. Oh, foul dust. So here comes the test. Come forward and look up close. Dun, dun, dun. Are you actually running, or have I switched you off? No, you're really running. Okay, well, while you're there, let's check. Now, I have to take this paper out in order to check this. They line up perfectly, and I think we can safely say we are clear of the scratch plate as well, which would be a great boon. So let's take the new tremolo screws, all 6 of they. Now we don't strictly need the new tremolo claw. There's nothing about the tremolo claw that needs replacing. So let's not put a new one in unless it's necessary. The only thing that tends to happen is when you put a new claw in, the screw spacing can be different, and then you end up having to fit some dowels and re-drill, which becomes a pain in the what's it. So what I'm doing is I'm just basically giving this an initial clean around the bridge. We'll do more cleaning as well, but just around the bridge to begin with, so I can reinstall this new, or install this new one fairly short orderish, and make sure it's good. So that goes up to there without any need for more spacing, so that's pretty good. Let's get these thingies up. If we can get this on and placed fairly quick, then we can just double check that the strings are aligned correctly. Should be, judging by the spacing of these holes. Of course, the big bonus of this is having the push-in arm, which is in many ways the real bonus of this. That's a very smooth feeling fit, although, is that right? Yeah. Let's just get this, first of all, get this one out of the way of the fixing screw, because we don't want that getting caught up. Okay, so our push-in arm would go like so. Yeah, that feels okay. So the next thing to do is, let's take one of the new ones, we might as well, and let's just fit that. We'll go in the centre first. And we'll hook it onto there and push it in. So that's now held in place, so we can concentrate on the outside ones. So this is a good drop-in fit. It's nice to know. But so far it's proving to be a good drop-in fit. Very nice to know, because I think it's a smart move by Harley Benton, making their guitar upgradable in that sense, because a lot of squares and so forth just would not work. Okay, so that's pretty good. So what I'm going to do, I probably should have done, let's take 2 of these off for a minute. What I just want to do is get the screws in to the right amount. So this should be pretty slack. So what I'm going to do is I want to dial out the the inner ones, dial out the inner ones, and I'm going to use the outer ones as a sort of 2-point fixing, and I want it to sort of touch down on the plate but no further than touching down, so I can feel the plate as it moves. What we don't want is it right the way down so that it pushes up the back of the plate. So we want it to just come down until the plate registers it's touching it, and then back off a tiny bit. Touch, nothing. And then basically your aim is to make the other ones put down in the same place, as close to as you can get, so they're not supposed to be pushing up or pushing down the front of the plate at all. And all you really want them is to be in far enough to do their job, which is to hold the bridge in place, and there to be now that is touching something right there. I'm just going to, let's just check on this. this one is sitting quite high up. Why is that? Let's try this a bit further down. I think that's about right, actually. I don't think I had it far enough down, weirdly. Yes, that's right. That was interesting. For some reason that didn't sit right to begin with. So we're good there. Now what I'm going to do, while it's still loose-ish, I'm going to press this down and I'm going to do an adjustment on the, there's a little, I can't really show you this. Oh, where's it gone? Don't tell me it's further down. There is an adjuster on the block which allows you to just tighten up the tremolo screw. So I'm going to have to try and either get to it like, oh, it's stupidly just down below the thing. Now this is weird because this is not loose enough to work ideally well, and yet it's something's not quite right about the way it's fitting. It should be freer moving than this. Come on. That's it. Right. So the trouble is we can't adjust this thing without taking all these damn screws out again. Let's do that one more time. Sorry. Normally on the proper Wilkinson, or the full price Wilkinson, the high quality Wilkinson version, that screw, that little grub screw, is visible directly underneath. As soon as you tilt it forward you can get to it. This is positioned further down, so either you have to have a huge amount of float, or you have to tighten it up to roughly where you want it before you fit the bridge, which is a bit of a silly thing, and I'm not best pleased about that. But I don't know if you can see it, but it's there, and it's lower down than it is on the non-M series. So what we'll do is we'll just put the arm in, and now the only thing I've ever had go wrong on this type of bridge, the M series one, is I've had that arm, that little adjuster screw strip, because it's not really that strong. But that will do me, so I'm going to call that workable. I'm going to go back to this, clean that up again. We start flat where we want it. And what is causing this? Something uneven, slightly uneven. It's not entirely flat, but it's okay. We'll work with it. Free movement of the tremolo block is the key, having it stay in tune. If we get anything obstructing anything else, it won't work. So we have to have it loose and floppy. So as soon as that's gone down, you can see that it's no longer loose and floppy, so we go off that end and let it be loose and floppy. And then we bring this end in until it similarly stops being floppy. Pretty good. And then these to a similar level, but they don't have to be as low as the other ones. In fact, kind of almost backed off is probably a little safer, because the less they obstruct the movement, the better. So I think that there is holding, moving freely. See, that starts to stop it. Starts to stop it. You got what I mean. It's pretty funny how that works. they're a pretty good match, so they shouldn't be causing anything to stick up. But you can see it's lost its flappiness. It's got it back there. I'm going to settle for that. It's that feel that's the most important thing. Right, so we get the first of the things on. We'll put all three on now. And then we're ready for that later on when we come to set it in a float mode, fully floating mode. Okie dokie. So this is taking longer than expected, but that nut was a fair old time. So now we have a nicely fitting tremolo, and wow, that is a hefty, that's tightly down at the moment, but that's fine, we've got no string loading. The reason this is buckled is that the scratch plate is squeezed in. I'm not going to take it apart because it works. It's the components have been squeezed in under a space that may not have been ideally designed to fit it, and that's probably one of the downsides of an aftermarket plate going into a budget guitar. But it works, so I'm not going to bother with it. It would require, if I took it apart, it would require me doing a whole heap of possibly even cutting away and routing to make it fit. So it's not perfect, but it's what Kevin's been used to. So I'm not going to trouble with trouble, if you get what I mean. Right, so there's the screw-in arm that can go in there. These can go in the bin. That's ready for a bit later on. Right, so the next part, I'll just do the next bit on camera and then I'll go off camera for some. So the next bit on camera is going to be the just simple recrowning of the frets. So, and then I will go off camera to do the polishing of the frets, and I'll let my equipment charge up and so on and so forth, because it will need to. Now where is my marker pen? It's over here. So to do the the fret recrowning, we're basically aiming to take the frets that we've flattened a little bit to get them level, and remember they're level when they're loaded, right? They're not actually now level flattened because the neck is relaxed and the bunching has gone. So these technically would not necessarily register. If you did a fret rocker now, you might actually find these don't register as level because they're not meant to. They are level when this is curved and bunched, and so it's hardly likely that they're going to be level now. So that's an important thing to know about if you use this method. So I'm going to start by recrowning using the StewMac crowning file, which is an expensive tool, but it's totally worth its money if you're doing setups all the time like I am. If you're just doing one or two, then you can use a three-sided file, which is a traditional way of doing it and has been effective for centuries. Takes a little bit longer and actually is technically fractionally more accurate, believe it or not, because you can actually, your aim here is to round off the flat spot and leave the thinnest possible line of black marker down the middle of the fret to show that you haven't lowered the surface of the fret at all, and actually you can get a much thinner line, all told, with the three-sided file than you can with this one. Kind of looking at, thinking, has it started raining yet? I've got a feeling we'll get a thunderstorm at the same time. So recrowning so that we're reshaping the fret, but strictly within the level that we've set for the surface of the fret. And so we basically will take away the edges of the flat spot and we kind of round them inwards towards the middle of the fret, and that's how we reshape it, but only within the existing material, which leaves the frets still level as they were relative to each other when we're under load. And what's nice about this then is once I've recrowned these, we could take the neck off, put it aside, store it for 6 months, put it back in and put it under load, and it will go back into exactly the same configuration. And because we've already leveled it under load and with the compression bunching it up, it will go back and play perfectly well, because we've now kind of encoded the fret level into the way the neck behaves. If you do this kind of, or if you do the leveling the traditional method with the neck off and relaxed and no strings, you'll get it 100% level if you use your fret rocker, and actually I would suggest that my argument is that's a little bit wasteful, because you don't need 100% level frets. You only need them level enough to play with the action you've chosen, but you'll get 100% level frets. However, as soon as you load the neck with strings, you'll get it will curve, but it will also bunch, and that levelness, as I explained earlier, will go down from 100% to 90, or in some cases 80, 75%. It'll make quite a difference, such that I can quite easily get a guitar that somebody's given to me that they say a tech has leveled, and they probably have, and they've done a good job with it, the neck off and laid flat and not under any load, and then when I get to work on it, it will require further leveling, and that's really the amount of leveling I have to do then is just a marker of the difference between that one method and the method I use. It's not a criticism of the tech, it's a comparison of the two methods. So before I do a bit of the sanding part, which I'll do off camera, I'm just going to, as much as I can, clean off the marker pen and the fretboard, just to minimize the amount of discoloration. We'll get more dust on it when I do the sanding out of the frets, but that'll be dust. This is getting rid of the marker pen so it doesn't leave any traces on the fingerboard. And you can see it's leaving a bit until I wipe it clean with this naphtha solvent. Okay, so that's nice and mostly clean. So I will now go off and get these charging again, but this section of the job will be, I will mask off the fingerboard, I will prepare it for sanding and polishing out, and then I'll come back when that's done, and we should be ready to put strings on and get everything going with a bit of an all-round clean as well. I'm guessing at this point in time that the new tremolo leaves the strings exactly where I want them, but if I don't know that for sure, I can always do a check like so, which is I can put a straight edge onto the slot in the nut, run it down here and run it along to the center of this saddle and see where it falls, and that falls pretty much spot on where I'd want it. So I'm confident that the bridge is at pretty much that drop in which I was hoping. Alright, going to stop now, see you again shortly. Oops, okay, here we have everything cleaned, polished, leveled, sanded, level crowned, sanded, polished out, everything cleaned, ready to fit these things. Tusk doofers, them. Hold on. Right, so I'm going to fit those, but in doing so I'm going to remove or slightly enlarge the holes, because these are diddy little screw holes and we don't want to split the wood. So we make it a bit larger. Those come off. Where are my, there they are. We need the drill, but we need the battery, which is here. Drill, battery. We need the drill bits, which are here. 2.5, that's good. Sorry. Okay, so we're nearly on the home stretch now, which is good because it's a Friday night and it's 9:30 already. So get home and chill. So now we've got a nice custom made or tweaked tusk nut. We also then want to improve our lubrication here by using the tusk trees. So I'll just get this a little bit wider. Right, this is going home with me because I've got jobs to do fitting on strap buttons on 3 acoustics for Paul. So we shall take that home. Right, so here we are, tusk string of trees. Okay, now we're going to fit 8 gauge strings to this, which is going to be a lighter loading than previously, so we're going to be ready to readjust the truss rod and to just put in a bit of extra relief if we need it, because obviously the lighter gauge strings aren't going to pull as tightly or as hard on the neck, so it's unlikely they're going to bend it as much, but we'll need to cross that when we come to it. So we've got the we'll put the that thing, oh god, I lose my words, tremolo arm on shortly, but first of all let's get the strings loaded up, and then we will load them, stretch them, there we go, load them, stretch them, and intonate them, and once we've done that I will then set the thing floating. And somebody asked me a question on YouTube today, is once you've floated the bridge, do you affect the intonation? And the answer to that would be absolutely fractionally, marginally. The intonation is a measure of horizontal distance of the string bridge apex to the nut, and it has to be larger, slightly longer, sorry, for every string in the set, with the shortest being the high E, and every string goes back to some degree from that. But when you raise up the plate and give yourself the floating tremolo, yes, you are tilting it forward incredibly slightly, but the amount you're tilting it forward by is minuscule in terms of physical space. It's enough to change the action height, which is what we have to take into account while we're setting the float, but it's in terms of horizontal actual distance, so the degree to which it affects the playing length of the string is absolutely tiny. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line you up on the headstock so I can show you how I fit these strings. I pull up to the thingy in question, the post in question, and then I cut 2 posts away from that and drop that in the first one, and then I get my noisy thing, make it easier. So I push that down inside of there, hold it back, wind it on, and make all the coils basically go underneath from that point. So make sure it's up inside the metal block, pull to the, one hand goes to the post you're aiming for, and the other one goes to post past there, which is where you cut it. And that way you have a minimum amount of, a dependable amount, but a small enough amount of string going onto the post each time. Now if you watch my videos, you'll know that the point I always make around about now is to go on about how your tuning stability, not only is it the most important thing on your whole guitar, because if your guitar won't stay in tune you will not reach for it, not unless you're completely unmusical, but if you're musical it has to be in tune to be worth playing. And your tuning stability has nothing to do with your tuners, but everything to do with two things, your nut and the slack in the strings. So it makes sense. I recommend you think of it as 50% down to each of those things. So 50% the smooth running, correct cutting of your nut slots and the right material for the nut to be made out of, so that they're cut to the right first fret action and there's no friction or catching. And then the other half of it is stretching out the unreleased slack in your strings. Now if you take care of the nut, which is why I always use Tusk, which has it's a good material to use, but it also basically has its own built-in lubricant, which helps to reduce the friction. But if you get that nut perfectly right, your guitar can still go way out of tune if you haven't stretched the slack out of your strings. And it can make you think that the nut's wrong, or it can make you think your tremolo's wrong, because your guitar, providing there's some slack left unreleased from the strings, your guitar will continue to go out of tune for ages. Equally, if you've stretched all of the slack out of your strings, but your nut slots are grippy and they are causing friction, then your guitar will continue to go out of tune forever, and it will drive you nuts. So you have to get both of these components done. So we've done the first part by changing the nut for a Tusk one and spending a lot of time very, very carefully fitting it so that the basically the first fret action is perfect, and ideally if the nut slots can be unfiled, if we can get away with it, the smoother they are, the more factory molded they are, the better. So we aim for that if possible, and then the second part after that then is taking care to stretch all of the slack out of your strings. And this is contrary to popular belief. It takes a long time to do. It just isn't something you can just leave overnight. Now with a set of 8s like this on, it's quite likely that you'll break one if you stretch as hard as I normally do. So I'm going to take it easy on this. And the caveat is that I often say I can't fully stretch out an 8 set. Because if I do, I break the 8, I've got no other 8 sets. So what I'm just going to do, before I stretch these, I'm going to get it to tune again. Then look at the relief. So I check the relief by, oh, this is all over the place. Of course, it's a different bleeding, it's a completely different set of saddles, isn't it? So let me take care of that first, and then we'll do the relief. So I want to set the action right at this end. I forgot that it was completely new, and it's all over the place. So I'm going to take these down and redo them, get them to the right action, and I'll take a bit of sort of zoning in on the correct action. Do it by eye to begin with, and once we get it roughly about right, then we can check the relief again. So bear with me a minute. It's getting actually dark out there. We're heading for not far now from the longest day of the year, June the 21st. Now these don't exactly have any notches on them, and mostly Strat style saddles don't. They kind of depend on sitting somewhere in the middle, and they tend to find their natural level, but it's not exactly a foolproof way. So we'll need to just make sure that the spacing is correct. I've got a Gibson ES335 to do tomorrow, and that has some I think nylon saddles which appear to have been just slightly notched by the owner, Chris, and I think they may be just slightly off the mark, so we might have to do a little bit of movement. So this is, sorry, a bit fiddly. I'm not really anywhere close to being in place yet, or at the right height, but we'll get there. Okay, let's go for this one. That's just over 1.5. Back off, sunshine. So let's call it good. That's a bit high. Sorry about this. Obviously we've been through this once already, but now I'm repeating it because we're on a different bridge altogether. Right, so let's come back this way. I'm looking at 1.5, too tall. Just over 1. This is a 13-inch radius, so we should be able to get a fairly a fairly low action out of it without any problem. So that's just 1.5. I'm going to pull this forward a bit. Sorry about this. We're just in the way of the too close to the screws for my liking. Right. So 1.2, 1.3-ish, 4-ish, a bit high here. And down a bit on the D. Although I think that's about right. So let's tune it up again. Okay, approximately in tune and about set right on the action. Now we're looking for the neck relief, and I do it by holding down the last and first fret together and tapping in between to check the amount of space between the string and the top of the fret about halfway along, which is usually about the 8th fret. And if there needs to be a little bit more than none. Now I'm going to do some stretching on the bass strings mainly, thumb and forefinger stretching. So caution with 8s, but if you really want your strings to play and stay in tune, you've got to do this before you start playing, and do it until the strings don't detune anymore each time you do it. That's the principal thing to remember. So that's what I'm doing here, and I'm obviously taking care now when I get to the high E, because it's very thin and quite easy to bust if I'm not careful. So I'm giving it a little tickle, but nothing too strenuous. That's not good. So if you don't get this stretching business taken care of before you do the intonation, you can't do the intonation right. It won't be steady. And certainly if you do it before you try and set the tremolo, you won't be able to set the tremolo to the correct range of float, which is what I'm going to do in a minute. That's the sort of final stage. So it's this detuning, this stretching out the slack is critically important for just about everything, including the setup, final stages of the setup, right down to getting playing. Right, so nearly in tune. Close. So now I'm going to set the intonation, and remember that the intonation is we're going to set it by means of a tuner, but it's a physical length issue, and the tuner is just a guide to whether we've got the right length or not. So, but I'm doing it at this stage because it's steady, and the tremolo is stable, so I can get the, it sounds gorgeous, I can get the intonation sorted out correctly, and then the movement it'll go through with the raising of the tremolo is minuscule. So what we want is to tune the pinged harmonic to the E and then fret it at the 12th, and that's in tune, or that's the same note. So if I take it that the E is correct, a high E is correct, then I already know what the standard stagger pattern should be for the correct intonation. I'm going to drag these saddles back to the correct sort of position, and then I will be almost completely intonated from the get-go. But I'm just doing this now by slacking off the strings, which will mean I've got to put a little bit more stretch into it afterwards. So you tend to have two groups of three in your intonation, and as long as you get one right, you can be pretty confident of the lineup of the others. So the E is the shortest one, the B steps about 1 millimeter back, the G does a millimeter back again, the D then goes about a millimeter forward of the G, perhaps a little bit less, like so, and then the A goes a millimeter back from the D, and the E similarly. Right, now you can see it's quite a big spread, and effectively it works out at two groups of three staggered, two sets of three in staggered relationship to each other. So I'll get these all the way back here. Of course it'll always scratch the scratch the chrome on here, so once you do it for the first time it'll always make a mark, but you can't intonate it properly without that happening, so you just got to put up with it. Right, so long view, back to the tuning. Again, once you've slacked off a little bit, you tend to put a bit of slack into the system. You've got to kind of be prepared to wring it out again. That's why I hate these strings. And I've got an E in my collection here. I have got probably mostly nines, E's, but nines. I have a spare E anywhere, a spare 8. Did somewhere. That's this one. That's a G. Well, I'm going to have to work with this 9 for a minute. But that's the problem with E's. Problem with E's. It's a problem with bloody 8s. Because you can't really do much in the way of stretching without it going kapoing as it did there. So, well, the thing is, I'm not going to I'm going to kind of leave this 9 on because I haven't charged for these strings because he supplied them. So, Kevin, I'm afraid you're an E string down in the 8s. Right. So that broke somewhere on the inside there as it came out over the edge. Not so good. This is a very stiff tuner. Not ideal, but we have to do it. Okay, that's good. Those are a bit short. Sorry, long. That's saying it's a bit long too, so we'll pull forward a bit. We've run out of room there. Let's run up against the saddle, so we don't got any choice about that. That's about right. That one there, that one there, that one there. Push that forward a bit sharper. Same there, and same there. That's interesting. All of this is sounding a little bit on the flat side, or the long side. Excuse me 1 second. I want to do a check on this. Yeah, that's interesting. Let's just compare this to the other one a minute. And what I'm trying to figure out is how far apart are they from each other. They're in the same place. So that means the bridge, no matter whose bridge it is slightly to something. 649. It wants to be 648. So it can't be 648 because of that thing in the way. That's the bottom line. You are where you can be. You're no further back than that. This one wants to be back here, and all of this lot want to be back again. Now let's going to check this out. See, I don't think really there's an awful lot else we can do, but the problem is this is the same on both bridges, so it's always have suffered from a slight intonation problem because they're in exactly the same place, but they're all shoved back a fraction too far. Let's check again. Now we'll ignore the E for a minute. Close, very close. Well, how interesting. Don't know what somebody's doing here. I'm just going to make some tweaks here. Ah, I see, it's a jet wash. Very well. Right, we are nearly there, but just about. Push that forward a fraction. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. So we need another string, really, because that's a bit of a chunky, not 8 gauge high E, but we can play with it for now. My concern about this is I have to get some 8s, because then I'll have to do the tremolo setup with the 8s, because there's no point doing it with that 9 on there, because it's going to put a whole load of extra thingy on it, pressure on it. So that will be the end of this right now. I don't even know if we've still got any video going. Yep, that'll be it for now. I don't know what the gauge of these are. What's the gauge of this one? Either 9s or 10s. Let's try and see if I can get it to look anything like it. 9 says. That's 10s. Well, let's stick a 9 on, and let's do the thing with a 9, because that was a 10, so that wasn't such a great one. I can get rid of that. That was a spare anyway. I'm certain I had a 8 somewhere, but I may have long since used it. So we'll get rid of that, and we'll stick a 9 on, which we can then do the close enough. The loading will be almost the same, barely any different for the tremolo, and then we can do it. But the intonation thing on that position of the bridge, it's exactly the same position as the other one, so it's just fractionally out of position, really. It's a physical measurement thing. It's supposed to be a 648 scale, and it's not at 648. The nearest you can get the high E is 649, and it needs to be 648, so we're about a millimetre out of position. And that's the kind of sloppy tolerances in the quality control, I'm afraid. Those are very stiff tuners up on this high E. It probably would have made sense to replace them, but hey hey. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use this old method to set up the tremolo in fully float. Now what I'm going to need to do with this is I'm going to again get the action dead right before we go any further. So we want 1.5, yes. We want 1.5, yes. We want 1.5 fraction less. we want 1.4-ish, tiny bit down on the G, probably a tiny bit up on the B, and on the mark with the E. So what we want to do is, first of all, before we do anything else for this business, I'm now going to wind down 0.5 millimeter, so 180 degrees on each grub screw back, so I'm lowering the action. And the reason I'm doing this is because when I set the float on the tremolo, it's going to come up by 0.5 mil. So this point here, I'm taking it down by 0.5 mil, which from trial and error happens to be 180 on each of the grub screws. So now I'm going to basically be setting an action that wouldn't be playable because it's all down by 0.5 mil. But once the tremolo floats upwards, we'll regain that 0.5 mil action. Okay, we still need to set it to pitch, so we go switch on, switch on. We need the tremolo arm for this, so we go on, tremolo arm here. Thank you. Then what we do is we play the G and we press it down till it becomes an E. And we stick papers under there until it's an E. Pretty close. Then we tune it back up to pitch. That's with the papers still underneath. Then you let go of the papers and everything's sharp, and then the secret is to slack the trem claw screws off until the G becomes a G again. So we're detuning the G by virtue of slacking the trem claws, and that will allow the tail end of the plate to rise up as it returns the string to a G pitch, but it'll stop at the point where it's G. There will be just enough room to bend backwards to get a fixed range of tone, and that's what that little thing with the post-it notes was about. It was about calculating the tuning from down to the E and then back up to pitch, was to build in a tone and a half on the G string, a tone on the B, and half a tone on the high E. A bit flat of G, so I'll just tie this up a bit. There you go. So there's my float that's now back in there with it in tune. There you go. That's it done. It's late. I'm going to stop at this point. Yeah. So only problem, broke a B string. But there we have it. Everything else is good to go. Just looking at the gaps down here, it's kind of, we are a fraction low on the B. I think what I'm on the low E. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I may just, it may have settled just a tiny fraction. I don't know. See, it's not. Actually, it's all right. That's not bad. Not bad at all. That's it for tonight, folks. Thanks for watching. Gibson ES335 tomorrow up on the old workbench. Look forward to that, and we'll get rid of these broken strings. Take these broken strings. Oops, copyright.